Hi, I'm John Nunn, and in this video I'm going to talk about one of my own books, Understanding Chess Endgames. This is a companion volume to Understanding Chess Middle Games, and it has very much the same format. I've chosen 100 of the most important endgame topics, and each topic receives a double-page spread with normally 4 positions per topic. Well, with only 100 topics and all types of endgames covered, from pawn endings to rook endings to queen endings, I've obviously had to be quite selective about the material I've dealt with. But I think I've selected the most important topics in each type of ending. So this book, which is aimed at club players and above, should give you a good grounding in chess endgames generally. It's not really a puzzle book. You can use some of the positions as puzzles if you like, and that's what I'm going to do when I show you these positions. I'm going to give you the chance to pause the video and think about the position for yourself, decide what you would play. So let's go straight in to the first position, which is a game from the 2004 Olympiad. It's white to play. So what should white play, and what do you think the result should be? So you can pause now. Okay, well, white should win with correct play in this position, but it does require a bit of care. White can obviously march his king across the board to take black's A pawn. There's nothing black can do to stop that. But if he chooses the direct route, let's see what happens. Kings both move across, but at this critical moment, black pushes his pawn. He has to do it here, because if white's allowed to play king b4, white will be able to take the pawn with his king, and then he'll keep his pawn on the b file. Much better to have a non-rook's pawn than a rook's pawn in king and pawn against king, and with the white king in front of the pawn like this, it will definitely be a win. So black chooses this moment to push his pawn to convert the b pawn into a less favourable a pawn, and now black moves his king across, and after say king b6, king c8, there's the general principle that with king and a pawn against king like this, if the defender's king can get to c8 without the pawn immediately promoting, of course, then the result will be a draw, and that's certainly the case here. So the direct route with the king, just running horizontally across the board, doesn't lead to a win. The line that leads to a win is what white actually played in the game. White again played his king over to the queen side, but this time using a zigzag path. Now this position actually occurs in a section entitled King Geometry, which deals with the geometrical fact that a diagonal route with the king is in some ways faster than a horizontal route. If you measure the distance the king travels from g5 to e7 to b4 with a ruler as compared to going straight across, then of course the zigzag path is geometrically longer, but it takes the same number of moves. So it means that you have a flexibility when you are marching the king across the board. You can often choose various different routes, and in this position the correct route is via e7, the reason being that white stops the black king moving to the f file. So black actually has to waste a move here. He can't move his king any nearer the queen side. This method of using one king to keep the other king at bay is generally called shouldering off, and it applies in many types of endings, but particularly in king and pawn endings. So let's see what happened next. Black has nothing better than to wait, and now white again brings his king back. Okay, and now white made a serious mistake, or a mistake that's really serious for the Grandmaster who was playing white in this game. Instead of playing king c5, which was the correct move, he played king to c6. Black moved his king across, and at this point black once again used the trick of sacrificing his pawn, and again got his king to c8, ensuring the draw. So let's see the win that white missed in this position. Instead of playing king c6, he should have played king c5. Now white threatens again to take the pawn with the king with king b4. So black has nothing better than to move his, to sacrifice his pawn immediately. But in this case, the black king is a bit further away, and white is able to occupy the b7 square to stop the black king moving to c8 and then running forward with the a pawn. So this was a second shouldering off manoeuvre. So there were various instructive points in this position. First, there was the geometry factor of the diagonal path taking the same length of time as the lateral path in terms of moves played. The shouldering off aspect of this, the sacrifice of the pawn, and the second shouldering off manoeuvre with the king going from c5 to c6 to b7, which should have won white the game. And that's really what I was trying to do in this book. Given the undoubted limitations of covering all endgames with 100 topics, I wanted to get the maximum bang for my buck and have the greatest number of instructive points in each position. And I did choose the positions pretty carefully so as to make the points I really wanted to make. Well, now let's go on to position number 2. This is in a section called Surprise Moves. I should add that I'm showing you these positions using Gambit's app, Gambit Chess Studio, which is available for Android and iOS, Apple iOS devices. It's a nice way to play over chess books on your phone or tablet, or if you have an Android emulator on a PC as well. Well, you might like to pause the video here and think about what white should play. Obviously white's a pawn down, white's hoping to make a draw here, but can he achieve that, and how, if so, how can he actually do it? Right, well, white has to do something about the f pawn, and the most obvious move, of course, is king takes f5. But the problem there is that when the pawns go forward, you can already see that black's going to promote his pawn with check. And you should know that queen against a d pawn on the 7th is a win virtually always, except for a handful of exceptional positions. This is not one of the exceptional positions, so the capture of the pawn on f5 loses because black promotes with check. But nevertheless, white does have to do something about the f pawn. So the next idea maybe would be to play king e5. But what happens then is that the pawns all get pushed and both sides promote like this. But then it's bad luck for white, because after this check, he either has to move his king to f6 when there's a skewer winning the queen, or to d6 when black checks and swaps queens and promotes the f pawn after all. So process of elimination, given that you've probably suspected by now the position is in fact a draw, the only possible continuation is king g5, which avoids both of the defects that we've noted. Black doesn't have to check on e4, like after king e5, and the black pawn doesn't promote with check, like after king takes f5. But still requires a certain amount of careful play to achieve the draw. I'll skip over the detailed analysis given in the book and just show you the main line. Black pushes his pawn, pawns start to run forward. Well, okay, if black now pushes his pawn, both sides promote, but with the king right next to the pawn, it's an easy draw. So if black wants to play for a win here, he has to bring his king back to stop the white pawn. And of course, this looks very dangerous because the black king is in the square of the white pawn, but white has significant problems bringing his king back, given that king takes pawn does not enter the square of the b pawn. So what does white do? He plays d6, forcing king c6, and now he takes on f5. And now this is what's called the Reti manoeuvre. It's a kind of double attack. White threatens to promote his own pawn by playing king e6, but also threatens to enter the square of the black pawn by playing king e4. So this is a nice motif. If black plays b3, you can easily see both sides promote at the same time. It's a draw, and so black takes the pawn, but now white's just in time to get back and get his king in front of the pawn with a draw. So the point I'm trying to emphasise in this section is that in king and pawn endings, surprise moves are actually rather common. Players don't expect them, and they often overlook them, even very strong players. So you have to be on the alert. I know it's not easy at the end of a long game, and if you're down to your 30 seconds a move, but well, that's an argument for keeping a bit of time in reserve during the second phase of the game. Right, let's go on to the third position. Well, okay, this position's one of the positions from the Rook and Pawn Endings chapter, which is the largest chapter in the book because Rook and Pawn Endings are the most common type of ending. It's an interesting position between two leading grandmasters. It's black to play. Well, black's a pawn down. Of course he can win the white rook for the pawn straight away, one way or another, queening and then taking with king or rook. But those two connected passed pawns on the queen side look pretty dangerous. So now's the time to think, can black make a draw, and if so, how? Well, let's first take a look at what actually happened in the game, which was black decided to cash in his passed pawn straight away and win the rook. It doesn't actually matter that much which way he takes. If he takes with the rook, white just plays a7 and then b6. It's a bit harder to win if black takes with the king, which is what happened in the game. And now this actually sets a trap, because it looks as though b6 is going to win. Because of the continuation, rook takes pawn, b7, check, 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 and now the promotion of the pawn can't be prevented, leading to the ending queen versus rook, which is a win. So at first sight it looks like pushing this pawn, b6, leads to a win. This is actually a trick that is often overlooked in practical play, but actually black saves the game by this intermediary check. Now if the white king goes up the board, black takes the pawn and pins the white pawn and takes it next move, and if the king goes back, white actually would lose if he pushed the pawn here, so he would have to play here, which of course leads to a draw in a few moves. So let's just go back. White can avoid this trap. He shouldn't play b6. He should instead activate his king, because he's going to put his king on a7 and then push his b pawn. So black played this and white went king a7, and now it's all too late because king, pawn, rook has to stop, and as you can see white succeeds by one tempo to win the black rook and then promote his a pawn. So the game ended in a win for white because black actually made a mistake by playing e1 equals queen. He did have a draw, and the draw is based on the fact that white's not actually threatening to advance either pawn right now. If he plays a7, black just takes it. If he plays b6, black plays check and rook takes a6, which enables him to give up his rook for both pawns, like we saw a bit earlier. Then, of course, he wins the white rook for his own pawn. So what he has to do is to play the rather surprising king d3. As a matter of fact, you can also draw with rook a3. That's more complicated, so I'm just going to stick to showing you this one. He's going to win the white rook for the pawn as before, taking back on e1 with the rook. But by playing king d3 first, he edges his king a little bit closer just at the moment when white can't do anything directly to advance his pawns further. So the best chance is to play king b6. But now it's different. Black queens, takes, a7, rook a1. When we got this position a bit earlier, assuming black took back on e1 with his rook, the white king was on c5 and the black king was on d2. White was able to support the a pawn by playing b6. But now his king is blocking the b pawn. And that makes a huge difference. He can't move his b pawn forward right now. So king goes up and black's king is sufficiently active that it's an easy draw. White queens, black takes and then takes the last pawn. So this is again quite surprising. The players obviously overlooked this, and the notes in Informata also overlooked this drawing possibility. But it's a very instructive possibility, because sometimes it's better to delay cashing in the passed pawn and doing something else first. In some positions it's cutting off the enemy king. In this position, it's improving the position of black's own king before winning the white rook. And it leaves white with an awkward choice. He had to put his king in front of the pawn because he couldn't push either pawn, and then black was able to effectively gain a tempo with his king and reach a draw. Well, this gives you a kind of flavour. These are actually some of the slightly more difficult positions from the book, but they were so interesting I thought I'd like to show them to you. There are a lot of simpler positions as well. But as I say, I still think that this book is a good general introduction to endgames with lots of practical examples from Grandmaster play, and I've tried to condense the maximum amount of instruction into the number of pages in the book. Well, thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you for the next one.